God can work in and through anyone. You don't have to be an educated or experienced insider to change the direction of God's people. You just have to be available. That's the experience of Cornelius, a Roman centurion and a symbol of Jewish oppression. His actions defied his culture and motivated the early believers to fulfill the commission of Jesus to carry the gospel to the ends of the earth. I'm Brent, and this is episode 55 of the Bible Unplugged. In this episode, we look at the role of a Gentile who changed the belief systems of the early Jewish believers and opened up the good news of Jesus to all people. Please take a minute to look at the show notes for this episode at powerloveandmiracles.com. While you're there, check out my devotional series that I publish Monday through Friday. Cornelius' story is found in the book of Acts, chapter 10. He was an officer in the Roman army, responsible for leading about 100 soldiers. He was likely a native of Italy, but we know nothing else about his background. Luke, the Gentile Christian writer of Acts, tells us that Cornelius was a devout man who feared God, gave gifts to those in need, and was a man of prayer. The text doesn't say explicitly that Cornelius was a Gentile, but from the response of Peter, we know that he was. He feared God and likely worshipped in a synagogue, but did not fully convert to Judaism. Cornelius was in a unique position religiously and politically. The people of Caesarea, where Cornelius was stationed, viewed him as a halfway insider in the synagogue. He was admired for his piety, but was still not one of them. Jews would not associate with Gentiles on a social level and would never enter a Gentile home. The Jews viewed Gentiles as unclean, especially anyone representing Rome. To make matters worse, Cornelius was a Gentile, a Roman, and a soldier. Not a good combination for his reputation. But Cornelius stood at the cultural and religious fault line between the ruling empire and God's covenant people. This made him the perfect person to bridge that gap. Luke tells us that Cornelius experienced a heavenly vision at about the 9th hour of the day, which would have been around 3 in the afternoon. This tells us that this was not an ordinary nighttime dream. In the vision, Cornelius clearly saw an angel of God coming to him and calling his name. Picking up the story in Acts chapter 10, verses 4 and 5, the text says, "He, fastening his eyes on him and being frightened, said, 'What is it, Lord?' He said to him, 'Your prayers and your gifts to the needy have gone up for a memorial before God.'" This recognition by the angel affirms that Cornelius' devotion was a memorial to God. This is a deeply meaningful word and is drawn straight from temple worship as described in Leviticus chapter 2, verse 2. In that verse, part of the grain offering was burned as a memorial portion on the altar, symbolizing that the whole gift belonged to God, but the remaining grain could still be used for other purposes. Luke used this sacrificial language to say that God received Cornelius' devotion as if it were given in the temple. There are several instances of outsiders engaging in acceptable worship in the Old Testament: Melchizedek in the book of Genesis, Rahab in the book of Joshua, and the inhabitants of Nineveh in the book of Jonah. I have a comprehensive list with explanations in the show notes if you're interested. The angel went on to say, "Now send men to Joppa and get Simon, who is called Peter." The angel gave no explanation about why this was important. Cornelius, being a good soldier, sent some of his trusted men, who appeared to be God-fearers as well, to get Peter. We will pick up with Peter's side of the story and the contrast between the way Cornelius and Peter responded to God in the next episode. What do we learn from Cornelius? God honors the devotion of anyone who seeks Him even before they fully know or understand who God is. As believers, we should see how God is working in non-believers. God loves them and is preparing their hearts and minds to accept Him. God was at work in the life of Cornelius before he heard the gospel story, which tells us that God can and does use anyone to further His kingdom. Cornelius' experiences show that some people are already fertile ground and are just waiting for the seed of the gospel to be planted in their hearts. Being accepting of non-believers does not mean watering down God's truth, but it does mean we should welcome all who are looking for a relationship with God on God's terms. What do we do with this? Next time you go to church, watch closely at the behavior of fellow church members. Do their actions, vocabulary, and unspoken expectations show love and acceptance of newcomers, or do they cause a barrier to entry? The people who are visiting may have never been to church before. They likely don't know the terms foyer, sanctuary, invitation, and offering. We are responsible for welcoming newcomers. Just be careful of the words you use and the actions you take to be sure they feel welcomed. Ask God to show you your spiritual blind spots. If you've been a believer for a long time, it's easy to forget what non-believers don't know yet. Be open to seeing worship and devotion from their perspective. This will open up opportunities for sharing the gospel that may have been easy to miss. Do you have any modern Corneliuses in your life? Who do you know that you may, at first, consider an outsider, but needs to experience God's love? Ask God to arrange opportunities to share the gospel with them this week. Ask yourself, if God's grace could break through to a Roman centurion, whose life do you think He's preparing right now? Yes, we've reached the end of the episode, but I've got a lot more in store. I hope this has been helpful. If so, please take a minute to give this podcast a high rating and share it with someone you know. In the next episode, we continue the story with a look at how God confronted Peter's attitude towards outsiders. This encounter changed the course of church history and led to spreading the gospel to the world. My prayer for you is that you will see how God has transformed your heart and gives you a heart for people who need to know God's love. Have a blessed week. Just to let you know, all opinions are my own. If you agree, keep listening. If you don't, keep listening. If you listen long enough, you'll agree with something I have to say. All Bible quotations come from the World English Bible, which is a public domain work. Our show theme song is Awesome Call by Kevin MacLeod and is available under Creative Commons license. The content of this podcast is copyrighted 2025 by J. Brent Eaton, and this has been a Power, Love, and Miracles production.